It's 3 in the morning and you're staring at the ceiling again, replaying that 20-second interaction from earlier today. You're wondering why you felt like an alien in a room full of people who seemed perfectly content to talk about the weather and their weekend plans. You probably felt a wave of shame afterward, asking yourself why you couldn't just be normal, or why a simple conversation felt like trying to solve a multivariable calculus equation in the middle of a hurricane. Society has a very convenient set of labels for people like us. They call you antisocial, or perhaps they tell you that you have social anxiety. They suggest you need to get out more or learn to loosen up, but they are looking at the software while ignoring the hardware. You aren't failing at being social. You are running a high-resolution operating system in a world that is satisfied with low-fidelity noise. I'm Silas, and today we are looking at the biological data behind why your brain is built for depth, not surface. You aren't broken, you are simply a sentinel intelligence. The fundamental difference between you and the flock comes down to a neurological mechanism called sensory gating. Most people possess a very efficient filter in their thalamus. When they walk into a crowded room, their brain automatically suppresses the hum of the air conditioner, the clinking of silverware, and the 3 separate conversations happening at the table next to them. Their sensory gate is a narrow door that only lets in the most relevant information. But for the sentinel, that door hasn't just been left ajar, it's been taken off the hinges. You are experiencing what we call leaky sensory gating. This means you aren't just hearing the person talking to you. You are simultaneously processing the micro-expressions of the person standing 3 feet behind them. The flickering of a fluorescent light that everyone else has ignored, and the subtle shift in tone that suggests the person you're talking to isn't actually happy, despite their smile. You aren't socially anxious. You are experiencing a massive influx of high-fidelity data that your brain is attempting to process in real time. It's not that you can't handle the room. It's that you are processing the entire room while everyone else is just skimming the surface. This brings us to the hardware of the small talk allergy. To most people, small talk is a safety ritual, a low-stakes way to signal that they aren't a threat. But to a high-fidelity processor, small talk is essentially cognitive static. When someone asks how your day was and expects a one-word answer, your brain views that as a waste of bandwidth. Your system craves information density. You want to know what a person is afraid of, what drives them, and why they believe the things they do. When the environment forces you to stay in the shallow end of the pool, your prefrontal cortex begins to starve. This is why you feel fake at networking events or parties. You aren't there to trade pleasantries. You are there to map the internal architecture of the people around you. If there is no depth, your operating system simply stops providing the dopamine necessary to stay engaged. You aren't bored because you're arrogant. You're bored because your brain is a deep-sea submersible being forced to float in a puddle. Let's look at the first layer of the data, which is your high injustice sensitivity. This is often mislabeled as being dramatic or difficult. In reality, your brain is wired to detect inconsistencies in the social fabric. Because you see the world in high definition, you notice when someone's actions don't align with their words. You see the subtle power dynamics and the quiet manipulations that others miss. This isn't a personality flaw, it's an evolutionary safeguard. In a tribal setting, the sentinel was the one who noticed when a leader was becoming corrupt or when a member of the group was being treated unfairly. You are a truth detector. Society tells you to just get along, but your hardware won't let you ignore the glitch in the system. You prioritize cognitive sovereignty over social compliance, which makes you a threat to those who rely on the status quo. Moving deeper into the hardware, we have to talk about hypervigilant pattern recognition. For many of us, This was forged in the fire of a chaotic childhood. Whether you were the scapegoat or the parentified fixer, your nervous system was rewired to detect the slightest change in the atmosphere. Your amygdala became a high-fidelity radar system. While others are relaxing, you are subconsciously scanning for threats, calculating exits, and reading the emotional temperature of the room. This consumes an immense amount of energy. This is why you feel physically exhausted after 2 hours of socializing. Your brain has run 1,000 simulations and processed millions of data points, while everyone else was just eating appetizers. You aren't fragile. You are a high-performance machine that requires a significant amount of cooling down after a run. That leads us to the concept of the internal locus of identity. Most people derive their sense of self from the flock. They need constant external validation to feel stable. But as a sentinel, your identity is generated internally. This is why you find it so difficult to perform the social scripts that everyone else seems to follow so easily. You cannot pretend to be someone. You aren't just to make the room more comfortable. This intolerance for cognitive dissonance is a biological trait. Your brain views lying about your internal state as a system error. When you refuse to participate in the performance, the flock views it as a rejection. It isn't. It's simply an act of digital autonomy. You would rather be alone in your laboratory of the self than lose your identity in a crowd of mirrors. We also have to address the phenomenon of time blindness and deep focus specialization. The sentinel brain doesn't move through time in a linear fashion like the average person. When you find a topic that provides the information density you require, you enter a state of hyperfocus where the rest of the world ceases to exist. This is why you struggle with transitions. Moving from a state of deep, meaningful work to a shallow social environment feels like a violent system crash. You aren't being rude when you don't want to pivot to a conversation about the latest celebrity gossip. You are protecting a high-value cognitive state. You are a polymath by nature, and your wide range of interests makes it impossible for you to be categorized by the simple labels society uses to keep people in their place. Then there is the issue of the mirror void. This is a tactical defense mechanism you've likely developed without even realizing it. When you are in an environment that feels toxic or overly transactional, you become a reflection of nothing. You use the gray rock method, becoming as uninteresting and unreadable as a dull pebble. You starve the narcissists and the manipulators of the emotional reaction they crave. They call you cold or distant, but in reality, you are just practicing strategic detachment. You have realized that your energy is a finite resource, and you refuse to spend it on people who only want to use it for their own gain. You are protecting the sanctity of your internal world. You are not a public utility, you are a private sanctuary. But we must also talk about the Kintsugi Club. This is the demographic of the forged. You are people who have taken your scars, the childhood trauma, the social rejection, the feeling of being an outsider, and you have filled those cracks with gold. You recognize that your sensitivity isn't a weakness. It's a form of high-fidelity hearing in a world of static noise. You have developed a level of empathy that is almost physical, yet you have learned to pair it with a cold, analytical intellect. This combination makes you dangerous to the flock, because you cannot be manipulated by emotional appeals. You see the logic and the emotion simultaneously, and you choose the path of autonomy every time. Now, we need to discuss how to optimize your environment for your hardware. Stop trying to be a social butterfly. You were built to be a deep-sea diver. The surface is where the noise is, but the treasure is in the depth. You need to stop asking for permission to leave the party early and start engineering a social life that actually serves your nervous system. This starts with the one-on-one rule. Replace large group gatherings with deep, meaningful interactions with a single person. This maximizes the signal and minimizes the noise. It allows you to use your emotional detection tech without the interference of a dozen other signals. Next, you must implement the authenticity filter. Stop attending events that are purely transactional. If the environment doesn't offer high information density, don't go. Seek out interest-based groups where the conversation naturally gravitates toward depth. And finally, you must respect the recovery protocol. View your social battery as a data cache that needs to be cleared. Solitude isn't a luxury for you. It is a biological necessity. It is the only way your nervous system can process the sheer volume of data you collect during the day. When you retreat to your home, you aren't hiding. You are performing maintenance on a high-resolution operating system. The flock will always try to pull you back into the middle of the road. They will tell you that you are overthinking or that you are too sensitive. But you aren't too much, they are just too little. They are living in a low-resolution world, satisfied with the static. You are the one who sees the patterns, who detects the signals, and who refuses to settle for the shallow end. You are a cycle breaker, a boundary architect, and a sentinel intelligence. Your solitude is not a prison, it is your fortress. Your overthinking is not a disorder, it is a high-speed simulation of reality. You are exactly what you were meant to be. If you've spent your life feeling like a foreigner in your own skin, I want you to look at the data again. You aren't broken, you are specialized. You are part of the wolf pack of solitude, a group of people who have realized that the flock is heading in the wrong direction and have chosen to forge their own path. You prioritize depth over noise, autonomy over compliance, and truth over comfort. You are the rare mind that the world needs, even if the world doesn't know how to handle you yet. If you recognize yourself in this data, if you've ever felt the weight of a room full of noise, drop a wave emoji in the comments. Let the other divers know that there is a community of people operating at your resolution. We are the Kintsugi Club, the forged survivors who see the gold in the cracks. We don't need to be understood by the flock. We only need to understand ourselves. Put the hoodie on, stop asking for permission, and start trusting the hardware you were born with. You weren't meant to fit in. You were meant to observe, to analyze, and to survive. Stay rare, seal is out.